Hello, you lovely people. Today I'm looking at the new Skyward Sword HD remaster on the Switch. If you follow me on social media, you'll have probably picked up that over the last year or so, I've been rather obsessed with the Zelda franchise. The jaw-dropping Breath of the Wild on the Nintendo Switch really helped me through lockdowns and pandemic anxiety, with its beautiful open world and spirit of exploration exporting me to another world. I was incredibly late getting into the series, of course, with Breath of the Wild being the most recent of the 19 main games since the first Legend of Zelda all the way back in 1986. I always admired the games from afar, but felt I would never have the time or the brains to take on such a huge and seemingly complex game. A combination of lockdowns, portable gaming and YouTube walkthroughs were to finally give me the chance and the confidence to make up for lost time. And I'm so glad that I did. From that first game, Breath of the Wild, I was hooked and went back to play as many as I could find on portable systems. So far, this has included seeing my way through to the end of 7 of the series: Breath of the Wild, Ocarina of Time 3D, Lynx Awakening, the Minish Cap. Well, okay, I never really beat the end of game boss with that one, but still. Phantom Hourglass, The Legend of Zelda, the first one, and A Link Between Worlds. And getting to at least halfway through 4 more of the Zelda games: Majora's Mask, A Link to the Past, Spirit Tracks, and Link's Adventure. From each of the instalments I've experienced so far, one overriding aspect seems to pertain: the way in which one of the main Nintendo flagship franchises seems to be a kind of tech demo for each of the new Nintendo consoles' capabilities. Think about the stylus gameplay in Phantom Hourglass, for example, or the 3D gameplay in Ocarina of Time for the N64. And perhaps the most dramatic and divisive of these leaps in technology for the series came with the Nintendo Wii and 2011's motion-controlled Zelda game, Skyward Sword. Fans' opinions were divided about this huge step away from what they knew or had come to expect about Zelda games. Although the motion controls and the style of gameplay were revolutionary for the time, they were also, shall we say, inconsistent. The graphic style too, although impressive, seemed to take Zelda into more of a Tomb Raider style than had previously been used, which again divided the fans. However, skip forward 10 years and the insanely popular Switch console has started to reevaluate and remaster some of their historic Zelda games, including Lynx Awakening, possibly my all-time favourite of the 2D Zelda games, breathing new life into the original Game Boy adventure and turning it into a much more fleshed out and user-friendly experience on the Switch. They brought out the first 3 games on their online Switch emulators for the NES and the SNES, but with the 35th anniversary looming, Nintendo decided to go back to the very beginning, canon-wise, and readdress Skyward Sword. And I'm so glad that they did, because one of the main improvements they've made was in giving the player complete choice over the notorious controls. Yes, you could decide to use the motion controls through the much more reliable Switch Joy-Cons, but you could also decide to use the normal controls if you wanted to. I would have chosen this control setup anyway, but only having the Switch Lite without the detachable Joy-Cons also made the choice for me. So, with all this hyperbole out of the way, how does Skyward Sword HD hold up in 2021? Well, I'd say pretty mixed. I still have my fair share of niggles with this game, but at the same time, this is a good Zelda game, and the improvements have definitely built up its defence against many of the unfair criticism that often gets levelled at it. So, I suppose I should address these niggles first. I'm sorry, but even with the new improved controls, I'd be lying if I said this wasn't still one of the most irritating control setups of any Zelda games I've ever played. And it's a shame, because it really does detract from the enjoyment of the game until you get used to them. And by the time you have got used to them, you've probably died hundreds of times more from the control mishaps than from the actual enemies. If you don't rage quit at least once from the 3 to 4 step process it takes to pick up, look around, angle, and then throw a bomb before it blows up in your face, then you're definitely a more patient person than me. And don't even get me started on the motion sickness this game gave me. Another irritation for me was the rather linear narrative, which seems to borrow from that most memorable and memeable of Mario level endings. Thank you, Mario, but the princess is in another castle. You work your way through areas that feel like dungeons to then take on proper dungeons, only to be told, oh, Zelda was just here, but she left. Try the next temple. Again and again and again. The world itself is stunning, and I wanted to explore a bit more. But the story's simultaneously best and worst ingredient is that it continues to drive you ever onwards. It's equal parts mesmerising and frustrating. I couldn't put it down, and yet after nearly every chapter I was left thinking, thank God that bit's over. I can't wait to see what's next. I don't think I've ever been so divided about a Zelda game as this. Now on to the positives. And you might be surprised to know that there are many for me. Firstly, as I've said, the world that Skyward Sword takes place in is absolutely gorgeous, and the gameplay is truly inventive and constantly intriguing. The music is some of the most beautifully orchestrated of any Zelda game. Motion sickness aside, it's great to have such a monumental addition to the series available on a portable handheld that you can take anywhere, rather than being tied to your Wii's sensor bar. The characters are memorable, and I have to say, the bosses throughout the game were easily some of the most inventive of the entire franchise. So, in conclusion, I'd say that although vastly improved for its 10-year anniversary, Skyward Sword will no doubt still divide the fandom. But is it worth a play? Most definitely. Thanks for watching.